right, good morning again, everyone. To those of you who have just joined this room and were not here for the remarks earlier, what we have, well, first of all, I'm Whitney and welcome. Congratulations to all the students. I want to let you know that this session and a couple other ones are being live streamed today. So when you ask your question, when we get to the question and answer session, we'll either be giving you a microphone so that you can speak into the microphone so that it can be heard on the live stream, or our panelists will be repeating the question so that it can be heard. And also for you to know that your questions are going to be live streamed. So this morning we have a panel called Conversation with the Deans, and we have our Dean of Academic Affairs, Liz McCormack, and our Dean of Student Affairs, Foster, and the two of them cover pretty much everything that is happening at Bowdoin for your experience, whether it's your intellectual and academic life, or whether it's student life. So what they're going to do this morning is spend a little bit of time, each of them talking about their areas, and giving you a couple of things to think about, and then we're going to open it up to questions so that students and parents can find out everything that you need to know about what the next 4 years of Bowdoin might be like for you as a student. And with that, Liz is first, I believe. Liz McCormack, Dean of Academic Affairs.
Hi, thank you, Whitney. I'm Liz McCormack, the Dean for Academic Affairs, and it's really exciting to be with you here this morning. It's a moment in time, isn't it? Some of you may already know you're coming, but many of you are still making that decision about whether Bowdoin is the right place for you. And we're here to help you navigate that choice. Having attended a liberal arts college myself, I'm really familiar with how important and transformative a liberal arts education can be. And Bowdoin's is a fantastic example of a quintessential liberal arts education, which I want to tell you a little bit about. But for me, when I was an undergraduate, it was a moment where my curiosities bloomed, my commitments and values came into focus for me. I made lifelong friends, and it really was a phase of my life where I became me. And I imagine many of you in the audience had similar experiences in college, and many of the students in the audiences, this is what you have to look forward to. I studied astronomy and physics, and then I pursued a research and teaching career for 25 years. And so I'm deeply experienced with the liberal arts model of education, having spent my career there. And I want to say the huge takeaway, and this is a phrase coined by my colleague Whitney Soul, the huge takeaway about the value of a liberal arts college is that small is big. And I want to tell you today 3 ways at Bowdoin how small is big. Talk a little bit about the faculty, a little bit about the curriculum, and then a little bit about the community of Bowdoin College and the broad educational experience here. So one of my most important jobs, but also delightful jobs, is to recruit and support an amazing faculty. We have faculty from all over the world, all over the country, and they are all super active scholars, researchers, creative artists, and they are deeply committed to one-on-one, small classes, investing in their relationships with students, and they're deeply committed in bringing the work they do in their research and scholarship, creative work, into the classroom and providing opportunities for students to see the way their intellectual vitality gets translated into great learning experiences that they craft in the curriculum. So when I was an undergraduate studying astronomy, I did an independent project with a faculty mentor. And looking back on it, I have a rosy picture of how beneficial it was for me. But at the time, I was doing a project studying what are called Lagrange points, which are places in our solar system where all the forces of gravity balance out to zero. They're really important because you can put satellites there and they'll stay there. They're like stable. So I was solving differential equations, I was coding up the solutions to make graphs and visualize, and then I had to write a paper in the style of an academic journal and give a talk in the style of a professional meeting. It was hard, and it was testing my mentor was really pushing me at the limits of my capabilities, urging me on. And, I can remember a quote, deep understanding only comes from this intense grappling with things. But it had a huge effect in understanding his belief in my ability to do it. It boosted my confidence, but it also modeled for me what it would mean to go on and be a researcher. So it was a great experience. And often Bowdoin alums talk about how these close relationships and collaborative relationships with faculty later on are some of the best memories and most beneficial aspects they think of their Bowdoin education. It certainly was mine. Even when I go back to my undergrad institution and I see my mentor, it's just great. We laugh about those differential equations, and it had a big impact in my confidence in going forward. So this close collaboration with faculty is one of the ways Bowdoin does in specific, small is big. Another way is through the curriculum. As a quintessential kind of liberal arts curriculum, Bowdoin asks students to do at least 3 things. The first is take a broad swath of different courses from different disciplines to really experience the different methods, ways of knowing, vectors of inquiry different fields use. And in some ways, that broad exploration is a way we go big at Bowdoin. But we also ask students to major and to go deep and to progressively develop an expertise and a mastery at these different rich levels of the curriculum. And that focus is the way that we ask students to go small. And then we ask them to connect this broad overview, broad perspective to their deep learning by exploring some interdisciplinary relationships, and in those courses, understanding how these different fields butt up against each other and create new opportunities for problem solving and new opportunities for new lines of inquiry. So those 3 components that make up the Bowdoin curriculum span this small is big kind of idea. I love this framing of small is big because it allows me to remember, how did I do that when I was an undergraduate? I still have my Russian history books from when I took Russian courses as an undergrad. I was thrilled and really enjoyed studying a foreign language, all at the same time that I was doing astronomy and doing physics and majoring in those 2 fields. And the way I put the broad and the focus together was I took a bunch of philosophy courses, and in those philosophy courses, it's a great way to connect physics to a broader humanities field. So I have great memories of really those surprises in how the liberal arts model unfolds for students as the exploration takes place. So I would say Bowdoin's curriculum is what you need and what you expect, but it's also going to be full of surprises as you explore it. And it really marries this idea of the big and the small. So faculty, of course, have spent intensive amounts of time and thoughtful effort to craft a curriculum that brings enduring kind of value for traditional knowledge, but also creates space for new knowledge and connected knowledge. But that's just one piece of the academic experience. The faculty are joined by a whole cadre of professional staff in different areas at the college that also support students in connecting their in-classroom, in-lab learning experiences outside the classroom and beyond Bowdoin. So the folks that help us do that are folks in our Center for Learning and Teaching, our Internships and Fellowships office, our off-campus study office, and an amazing group of folks in our career services. These folks will get to know you individually, and they'll know your interests, they'll help you apply to various opportunities that will allow you not only to find resources on campus, but off campus. And I benefited from something like that when I was an undergraduate too. I found a fellowship in my junior year, between my junior year and senior year, a fellowship out at Stanford University through a similar office at my college. And what a great summer that was. I went to work at Stanford at the Linear Accelerator. It was my first exposure to so-called big science. And as a junior that year, and being in a community of folks all focused on this one big experiment, it was truly inspiring. And for me, it was the moment where I knew I wanted to pursue a PhD and do research. So it was a tremendously important opportunity. And I also learned, being a New England gal, while I could set my watch on when the fog rolled off the bay every day, the weather was the same every day in the summer, I really look forward to getting back to the ups and downs of a New England weather. And here we are, this spring, and there's snow on the ground. So anyway, so this idea of a full-on community committed to student success is a key part of how Bowdoin makes small big. So here we are at this moment in time. I've shared with you how our student-centered faculty, how our enduring liberal arts curriculum, and how our community supports students to grow and achieve and become who they are becoming. And I also shared some of my experience of how I've experienced this type of education. And now all those kinds of experiences are awaiting the students here in this room. So let me close with a question for you all. How might Bowdoin's small is big be right for you? Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I'm a wanderer, so I'm going to wander a little bit. Let me welcome you, those of you who are, and congratulate you, those of you who are able to be here, and also those of you who aren't able to be here, but I know are listening in. Welcome and congratulations. My name's Tim Foster. I'm the Dean of Student Affairs, and I am the parent of two college-age students, one of whom graduated this past year from a place eerily similar to this place, and one of whom actually is a sophomore at Bowdoin right now. So I can say I have quite literally sat where you are sitting right now. And as a person who's been at Bowdoin now, working here for 23 years, it's very easy for me to talk about this place with great passion. But rather than do that as a talking head administrator, I thought it might be better to do what I really love to do. And that is to go to students and say to students, I have this opportunity to talk to incoming students and parents. And what would you suggest that I share with them? And so they gave me all kinds of ideas. And I picked my 6 favorite quotes to share with you. And I think these 6 favorite quotes really focus on the Bowdoin experience and sort of what I would call the culture of the college. So I'm going to share them with you, and then we can open it up to whatever questions are on your mind. So the first one, and Clayton referenced this, but the quote is, ours is a collaborative work environment, not a competitive one. And what I would encourage you to do throughout the day, but is to ask students about this. This is not a place where people will be asking about your GPA or your grades. It's just not who Bowdoin, it's just not who we are. And yet, this place is populated by highly accomplished and wicked smart people. How many Mainers in the room? Wicked smart people. but not a place that's populated with a lot of chest thumpers. It's a place of great humility. And two of the things I love about this place is I love that humility and I love that collaborative spirit. So ask people about this as you encounter them today. Second quote, you can't fall through the cracks at Bowdoin. You have to dive. What does that speak to? It speaks to the network of people who are here, who are focused on your success. So think about this. Every student at Bowdoin has an advisor. Every student at Bowdoin has a dean. Every student at Bowdoin has a proctor or a resident assistant. Every student at Bowdoin has the cadre of faculty who they have in a given semester and who they had in previous semesters. And many students at Bowdoin have a coach or coaches. This group is sort of a network of support. It creates a web that makes it exceedingly difficult to fall through the cracks, because these people are here focused on your success. I also would say, if you're interested in coming to a place where you want to be anonymous, this is probably not the right place for you. So I'll share that. Okay, quote 3. You will have the opportunity to lead at Bowdoin. If you don't, it's only because you've chosen not to. So we are about, if you read the offer of the college, we are a place that's about developing leaders in all walks of life. How does this happen? There's 130 student organizations on campus, and those 130 student organizations have countless leadership opportunities associated with them. But there are also 75 proctors and RAs on campus. There are also 31 varsity teams and 12 club teams, all with captaincies. There also are 8, will soon be 9 college houses, and all of the students who populate those houses and create social, cultural, and educational programming for campus and the leadership opportunities associated with that. There's peer health. There's the outing club and the outdoor leadership training program. Each of these different leadership opportunities, whether you're a student organizational leader on the Res Life staff and the outing club and athletics, each of these different opportunities has a leadership development program associated with them. So it's really about figuring out not whether you want to lead, but where you want to make a difference. And so I'd leave you with that thought from students. Number 4. I like this one. People love this college. And so I would say for some that sort of falling in love process happens before they even arrive on campus. For other people it happens once they arrive, within the first week or in the first semester or by the end of the first year. But for almost every student at this place, that process happens. And it seems to happen regardless of where that student comes from or the life experience they've had and that they bring to Bowdoin. And it's a special part. I think it speaks to the sort of sense of community that we enjoy on campus and the feel of this place having a real soul. So test drive that as you're on campus today. Then this 5th quote, I thought this was sort of profound in a way. Bowdoin wouldn't be Bowdoin without Brunswick, and Brunswick wouldn't be Brunswick without Bowdoin. And to say that is, Brunswick is it's a college with a town. It's not a college town. So this is a community, the Brunswick community, with an awful lot that's going on. And some of you are here for the day, some of you are here for 2 days. I would really encourage you to do what our students do and get downtown, figure out what's going on, visit the McKean Center for the Common Good just outside the back door here in the chapel, which is our service organization on campus, all about community engagement. So many of our students are actively engaged in the life of the community. So check that out while you're here as well. And then finally, I thought this was an appropriate quote from a student to close on. Do exactly what you are doing today. And by that I mean, go to class, walk around campus, and as you see people walking around who look like they're from here, students, faculty, and staff, Ask questions of these people. Liz and I will answer the questions for you. The folks in the admissions staff will answer questions for you. But stop people and ask your questions, students, faculty, and staff, whatever questions you have. And then I went to a place, I did not go to Bowdoin, I'm not a Bowdoin graduate, but I went to a place very similar to Bowdoin. And what I found myself doing is I'm someone who tends to analyze things, and I had this matrix, and I was thinking of the pros and cons of this place versus that place. It was a little bit overdone, I'll confess. And then in the end, my parents said, why don't you just walk out in the middle of the quad on the campus where I actually attended school and look around the place. And I did that. I did this. I did a little twirl. And could you imagine yourself being there? How did the place feel to you? Absorbing all the, having been on campus and going to class and visiting with folks and getting to know students and faculty and staff. I would encourage you to do the same. By the end of today, we will have melted the snow. Walk out into the middle of quad, do a pirouette, and see if you can imagine yourself here. Those are the quotes I wanted to share with you from students, but what we really want to do is open it up to your questions, whatever they may be. So who wants to be first? And we're going to actually take some time to get the microphone to whoever is asking the question, because the live stream will not work if the microphone is not in your hand. So who wants to be first? I'm not going to come up and do what Clayton did. Liz and I could ask ourselves questions.
I haven't spoken in a long time. I'm just concerned about the stress level of students. Is high stress? I mean, I know they're all very motivated themselves, but how much pressure is on these students?
You want to go first?
Want me to go first? So I think it's a great question. It's a question I would ask students. I would, ask as many students as you can to see what they feel about the stress level at Bowdoin. This is a place where people work hard, I would say. They work very hard, but they also have a great deal of fun in ways that keep me up at night sometimes. So there's an awful lot of fun here, lots of ways to make fun. Students do have fun. I think one of the things that's happening in our culture, in our society, if you can't read a newspaper today and not hear about increasing levels of anxiety and stress, that's, occurring on our campus as well. And so one of the things that we have done and made quite a significant investment in student leadership on this front too, has been in practices of what I would call mindfulness. So we're seeing increasing numbers of students come to Bowdoin having had experience with meditation, yoga, tai chi, qigong. So many of our students are athletes. So many of our students are actively involved. They may be involved in the outing club. They may be, exercise, I think, is incredibly important. So you sort of combine these notions of physical activity and engagement, mindfulness practices, and then making fun. But I would ask that question of people as you encounter them today. It's a great question. Yeah. Liz, would you add anything to that?
No, that's good. I'm glad you mentioned. I think there's an ethos here of building students' ability themselves to better manage all the things they're trying to do and the stress that may produce, and becoming resilient themselves or in control of their time management and awareness of when they need to take a break, et cetera. So I like this approach of empowering and providing the resources to students to learn how to do it is really important, I think, because then they have that skill as they go out.
Hi. For those students who aren't used to such a small town and small community, it's one of the things that I know that my daughter's looking at in terms of comparing with the other schools. What are the challenges of adapting to the small town feel, small college feel, and what do the students do to overcome that?
Right. This is another question that kind of spans. I mean, I think it's fantastic to be in a community that's big enough to have a there in town, lots of other things to explore and engage with. And we have a rich academic partnership with community organizations where students, whether it's a purely voluntarily thing or something that's actually community-based curriculum that creates ties to this community. But there's transportation down to Portland, and some students in the weekends will take advantage of that city, small city. And then, of course, every weekend, as Tim can probably speak to better, all sorts of clubs, the Outing Club, take off and do trips and facilitate kind of getting off campus to explore this area of Maine. You know, I think it's important to point out, Bowdoin's a residential college, and it comes with some great wrappings around the academic experience through Res Life and all the programming that students themselves get involved in creating. So I think there's a richness in our small community, but there's also ways to access getting off campus.
Yeah, and I would, the notion of being a residential college is a hugely important one, because what I've noticed in my time here is that the experience students have at the place is really defined by the people who surround them. So the students, faculty, and staff who surround each student really, in the end of the day, end up defining that person's experience. What we do and what our students do is I'll use this expression, we burst the Bowdoin bubble in all kinds of ways. So that may be up and down in town. It may be engagement with America Reads and America Counts and traveling down to Portland or being tutor in an elementary classroom. Those kinds of things happen, or taking the train down to Portland or to Boston and the bus service, and that happens. Then there's ways that it happens over the arc of one's experience. So you'll have things like alternative winter break programs that take you here, there, and everywhere, or alternative spring break programs that are both national programs, but also programs where students travel internationally. Then you'll have study away, and 55% of students now are studying away, and they'll travel all over the world. And so the notion I think I would also share is that as the world becomes increasingly flat, that the experience isn't just defined by what happens here on campus, it also what happens off campus, and also what students are able to access, even still being here, but in other parts of the world because of the web being what it is, and so people bringing things in through that as well. It's a great question. Yeah.
Yes, we have one down here.
Is that a microphone?
No?
Sort of building on that, how does the college help facilitate summer research opportunities or study opportunities?
Yeah, we have a really strong Office of Summer Fellowships and Research, and our career services supports an internship program. So those two offices, I think, provide not only gateways into those opportunities, but support for accessing and applying for those opportunities. And one of the things I love about Bowdoin is we're very committed to any student that earns an opportunity to do a summer fellowship at Stanford or here at Bowdoin, or to do an internship in California or down in New York. That office is funded to find a way to support the student to be able to take advantage of having found that. So it's a very robust set of activities. Yeah.
And I mean, our students are remarkably inventive and imaginative. So we have a couple hundred students who are here in the summertime. Many of them are doing research with faculty members. So you'll have lots of our faculty with students doing research with them. And then you'll have students who are staying on campus because they're working on campus. They may be working in athletics, they may be working for admissions, they may be working in alumni relations, so you have students who are doing that. But then the vast majority of students are going off and having, now what's becoming increasingly common is substantive internship experiences. They may be working in research at Dana-Farber or Maine Med, or they may be working for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And what Liz is picking up on is really important, is we're able to offer increasing resources for students who win internships that aren't funded. So one of the things that's been a big push for us in recent years has been to increase the amount of funding we can provide for internships that students win that aren't funded. So that's a big inducement as well for our students. Yeah. What other questions do people have?
What are one of those late night activities that have kept you up at night?
Oh my goodness. I've thought about the book I could write.
Huh? Yeah.
I thought about, so, well, you know, I live a couple hundred yards that way, and I think all the time I focus a lot of my energy and attention on student health, safety, and well-being. And so students can get really creative in their fun making. There's always, I guess I would say, there's an active social and nightlife on campus. And so, gosh, though, some of the traditions, this is a good question.
It doesn't just say.
You know, there's certain traditions, I guess I would say, that sort of people look forward to. I'll tell you one that's coming up in just 2 weeks, and that's called the Ivies tradition. It's called Ivies, and it's really a time, it's over a couple days. It's sort of Friday, Saturday, into Sunday. And it's actually interesting because it's a tradition that got perverted from what it once upon a time was, which is 100+ years ago, people would plant ivy up against the first-year bricks. And the ivy grew and wasn't that beautiful. Now it's really become sort of a spring fling of a kind. And so there's bands that come to campus, featured bands, and there's all kinds of great traditions that are part of Ivies. And students really look forward to that. As you know, when summer blooms, or I should say spring blooms in Maine, we hope that it all comes together and it's a really fun weekend that students look forward to. And of course, as they're having fun, I want to make sure everyone's being safe. So that's what I'm focused on. So it'll keep me up a little bit. Keeps the director of security sleeping on a cot in his office. Yeah. Yes. Well, you got a long run there. Okay, we'll do that. So why don't you ask the question? I saw your hand up, and then we'll repeat it so that... So my question is basically about turnover with the faculty. And I don't know exactly what the national one is, but faculty less than 10 years, longer than 10 years, where do you guys fall in that spectrum? And when you have turnover, does it change with any particular areas of study?
Oh, yeah, really interesting question. One way to answer it is...
So repeat
Oh,
it.
that's right. The question is, what's the rate of turnover of our faculty, and perhaps a little bit about the tenured ranks and how it's distributed, and are there any differentials across different areas of the curriculum? So one way to get at that question is to note that every year we probably search for somewhere between 7 and 10 new faculty to come join the ranks, because somewhere around 7 to 10 are either retiring or occasionally they're lured away to other places. I would say we work really hard at recruiting faculty of the highest caliber, and so sometimes they are stars, and they might be recruited away by an R1, a research university or something. So that's one measure of kind of faculty turnover. I wouldn't say that there's a big difference between what's happening in the humanities or the social sciences, the arts, or the natural sciences in terms of that natural flow. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Here we go in the middle. Oh, right here, sorry.
What was the school you did the twirl at? That's my first question. I have a second question.
I went to school at Dartmouth in Hanover, New Hampshire. So it's a big green, big twirl. Yeah.
So you probably represent pre-social media? today, how do you feel? Is it a headache or does it help student life?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. So the question, which people heard because you did have the mic, is about social media. Is it a help or a hindrance? I think it's been amazing in the arc of my 23 years at the college how communication patterns have changed, just having been here. And many of us in the audience, I'm sure, can remember if we went to college, there was a payphone on the floor, and the phone would ring, and sometimes it would ring 100 times and no one would answer it. But once a week, I remember trying to call home, and I might get a hold of my parents, and if I did, I'd talk to them, and if I didn't, I'd wait another week. And I might even write a letter. Today, I would say it's much more common that students and families are having interactions within a day with one another. Text messages, emails, phone calls. I love to go around campus, and whenever I see a student on the phone, I say hi to mom for me. I would just say to the parents in the room that while those communication patterns have changed, and while we really want you all to be part of this place, this is really about your sons and daughters' experience. And I think the beautiful thing is they're coming here and they're having the opportunity to discover all kinds of new things for themselves. And I would really encourage you to let them dive deep into that. They're going to make some choices and decisions along the way that won't be good ones. And that's okay. That's how they learn. I think to go, in a different direction, and I think probably where your question was, is what does it mean for, we can think, and Liz will talk a little bit about how social media might even influence the work in the classroom. But I would just say that I'm constantly, and maybe I'm a Luddite, but I'm sort of thinking quite a bit about how students are engaging with one another. And the phones I find to be a real distraction to that, quite honestly. And I like to give people a hard time if you walk into the dining hall and everyone has their phone on the table and they're having a conversation, but they're also, watching their phone and doing what they're doing on their phone. We have power outages on campus sometimes, and those are beautiful things. I've been accused of creating power outages on campus. But I just think the thing that's special, and part of the special sauce of this place, is what I was talking about before, is how students come together and connect with one another in personal ways. Liz, what would you add as it relates to the classroom?
Yeah, social media apps are a part of a bigger suite of technological tools that can be leveraged to really enhance education. And so I've seen faculty use, Twitter channels as they're mocking maybe an academic conference as part of the end of a senior seminar, as a way to really engage students in commenting on what they're hearing. At Bowdoin, we have a commitment to face-to-face learning, and there's a way in which technology, through discussion groups or through connecting to the internet and sources of information, is really important, but it's always done in a hybrid way with the face-to-face classroom activities. And I think for liberal arts education, that kind of married approach of technology and face-to-face learning is the right mix. Next week there might be some other tool, right? And I think it's really important for faculty to consider them as potentially really helpful to the work they do with students. We have an academic technology consulting service that kind of sits between our IT department and our library, and those professional staff help faculty consider new tools and experiment with them in their classes and support them in learning how to use them. And so I think it's really important to follow that technology, but to use it in really deliberate ways.
I'll just add one other thing. One of the things we've learned is how things change so quickly. Email, which was once the go-to communication form, so many members of your generation aren't paying as much attention. So I have a son who's a sophomore here, and an important campus message will go out via email, and I'll send them a text saying, look at the email that just got sent to you. And so it's encouraging us to think about how we communicate with students in different ways, where students are swimming and living. So whether it's through text messages or other forms of social media, we think about that as well. Yeah.
Down here.
This is kind of a follow-up question to the previous one, but Bowdoin is a very old college, and this comes along with its own tremendous benefits and traditions. But could you speak to the ways that Bowdoin is kind of open to progressive change in the curriculum or in engagement with students or administrative practices that kind of bring Bowdoin into the future and put Bowdoin on the forefront of what's happening currently?
Sure, I can speak to what we're doing in terms of the curriculum. How are we developing, evolving, and even radically changing a liberal arts curriculum to be not only relevant, but in some ways a really important preparation for students today, but tomorrow, going out into the world? One area, of course, is recognizing what are the implications that we're truly and deeply in a digital age now. And we're in an age where machine learning is really changing how we are even thinking about problem solving. So students will be out in that world and not only perhaps directly working with some of those new modes, but as a society asking good questions about when and how should we be using those techniques, for example. So we're working on providing opportunities from across the curriculum, not just in STEM, to get experience with big data, the kinds of algorithmic and computational problem-solving methods that are now so ubiquitous, and how to understand those ways of knowing and those techniques in the area they're interested, whether they're doing French literature and they want to do text analysis, or whether they're in the social sciences and they're wondering how to clean up and sparse big data sets from the government. So rather than have everybody take intro computer science, the idea here is what are the basic fundamental skills, knowledge, and also critiques, and how do we help faculty develop the capacity to introduce those things in their area. And that way all students get exposed to some of these rapidly changing and important things going on, and have a little bit of a chance to engage with them. So we have a focused effort at building faculty capacity to do that and adding more places in the curriculum where that intentionally happens. So that's one example of trying to address this digital age and the ethical reasoning that has to go with it.
Yeah, I'll give just two different kinds of, there's so many examples, but I'll just give two totally different as it relates to sort of the student life and student experience. Clayton talked a little bit, if you were here, about Bowdoin becoming increasingly compositionally diverse. So when I was the dean of first-year students for the class of 2000, so that was in 1996 when I joined the college, there were 5 African-American students in the class of 463 students. Now, the college is 33, 34% students of color. It's changed markedly in terms of the racial composition of the student body, but also in terms of the socioeconomic profile, in terms of gender, in terms of sexual orientation, gender identity and expression. And so one of the things, as we think about moving beyond compositional diversity, we'll continue to focus our time, energy, and attention there, but is to think about inclusion and how people feel, is this a place where they belong? And how are those students who are spending time with one another, surrounding one another, how are they learning from one another? They're here, how are they engaging one another? So something like intergroup dialogue, for example, which is something we've spent a lot of time with, allows groups of students to become trained and then facilitate conversations with other students around issues around race or around class, whatever that focus may be. Totally different example, though. I'll shift over and say, in the old days, i.e. just a few years ago or a number of years ago, I could be a student on 8 at Bowdoin, and I could have a passion for, let's say, working in the arts. And in the summertime, I happened to get contacted and win an opportunity to work at the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art in New York City. That experience, it's an unfunded internship. That experience is not accessible to me as a student on aid because I have a summer earnings contribution I have to make. How am I going to live in New York City when I'm from Turner, Maine? The cost of living, the summer earnings contribution, the need to make money for the year ahead. And that kind of opportunity was foreclosed to me. And yet this was something that could really be powerful in the way it defines my life interests, my professional interests going forward. And so one of the big things that we've tried to do in recent years, and we're spending more and more time on this, is to identify what I guess I would call sort of barriers for students' full participation and full enrichment. And so in that case, it's an internship opportunity and creating more funding for students who win that kind of opportunity to be able to go and have that experience that could then lead to all kinds of things, rather than go back to Turner, Maine and work, at Denny's to make money where I can live for free. To go have that experience in New York City, if you see what I'm saying. So those are two different kinds of examples, but there's so many examples, and it's a great question. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. He's had his hand up patiently in the middle of the room.
Could you talk about the ways Bowdoin, keeping in mind it being a small liberal arts college, is equipped to prepare students in the sciences for kind of a career in technical research and kind of get students hands-on experience?
Sure. So the science faculty here at Bowdoin spans chemistry, biochemistry, physics, astronomy, neuroscience, mathematics, all kinds of biology. And we've got field stations up at Kent Island and out at the Coastal Studies Center. I don't know what your particular interest is. Incredibly research active. And when you think about preparing to maybe immediately go and do lab-based work with an undergraduate degree, or take a gap year doing that and then applying to grad school, or immediately preparing for a graduate degree, the opportunities to do research with faculty are a big boon to those applications, and modeling what it looks like to do research, because it's a distinctive pathway, and having a little bit of insight into what it's really going to be like is really key. So the opportunity to work with faculty in their labs side by side in the summer or during the term, many huge number of opportunities here across all those fields. But then, I was talking about this before, because we're small and you get to know one another really well and you're collaborating with faculty are going to be writing letters of recommendation. They're going to be able to recommend schools that match up with your interests and use their networks to help you make a good choice about where you might pursue that. So I think the relative size of the liberal arts college, maybe myself's a good example. So I had a great foundation in physics and astro when I went out, but when I went to grad school, did I have to take a few more courses because there wasn't the huge curriculum that a R1 research university would have? Sure, I may have taken a couple, but there's a way in which I was strongly prepared because I knew how to learn, and I could be kind of withstand the variability of the type of lecturers you would get in a graduate school. So if you're thinking about that trade-off between specializing at a bigger school versus how well would you be prepared at a liberal arts college, the foundation is definitely there, and in some ways even more valuable is the sense of your capacity to adapt and deal with, knowing how to learn on your own really will serve you well at all sorts of different grad schools. So I hope that answers your question, but there's a strong, I think there's a statistic, and I'm not going to remember it, But if you look at the origins of students who get PhDs in the sciences, where were they undergraduates, right? Most of them come from liberal arts colleges. The ones that succeed in graduate STEM programs are disproportionately represented by students who have started at small colleges.
I would just add one quick story that just happened this week. So we had a reception for our women's basketball team that, lost in the national championship game, and remarkable group of women. And at the reception, I was talking to one of the seniors, and I said, I haven't seen you, since you had the chance to win, or play in the national championship game. And she said, yeah, I just returned from having given a paper that I wrote with one of her faculty members from a conference where she presented this paper and gave this paper. And she was just listening to her talk about this. Here's a senior who's now had this experience. The thing that we hear over and over again from our students when we do what's called the senior survey every year, and we ask about what's the most satisfying aspect of one's Bowdoin experience, the answer that we get back is the relationships that students develop with faculty within and beyond the classroom. And so there was the opportunity to work on this paper, present this paper at a conference, but then to travel with this faculty member. And that will be a lifelong relationship. That will be an enduring relationship that will go well beyond the Bowdoin experience, and those two, I have no doubt, will remain connected over the arc of many years beyond the place. That's one thing I would just underscore for all of you, whether you're not knowing what other things you're contemplating, but one of the things that's powerful and special about this place is the association you'll have with the faculty who are here, with the staff who are here, but then with the alumni body. And really, once you become a polar bear, shall we say, you become a polar bear for life. And the opportunities and associations as a result of those relationships are extraordinary. So, yeah.
We have time for one.
The dean tells us we have time for one more.
There's been someone up behind you that wanted a question. So would you mind shouting your question and they can repeat it?
Now, that's a great question, right? So what are the challenges that Bowdoin faces going forward? One challenge was from the perspective of the curriculum and faculty, really comes up with this question we heard before. The enduring value of the educational structure and the curriculum at Bowdoin is in tension with a rapidly changing society outside. And how do we manage evolving our curriculum in ways that really protect and preserve and carry forward this enduring value of a liberal arts based education, at the same time trying to respond to what students are going to need that's different and infusing them together. And that's the work of the faculty, and it's my job to support them, to find the time and the energy and the optimism to work on that challenge. So that's one example in the curriculum.
Yeah, I'll give one other just really quick example. And I always think of sort of the challenges as opportunities too, but one of the things we observed, we never had a policy regarding off-campus housing. So students who wanted to live off campus could live off campus. In the first and second year, you're required to live on campus. But in the junior and senior year, if you chose to want to live off campus, you can live off campus. And so we observed over the course of several years that a larger number of students were moving off campus. And we wanted to understand why that was. We went from, let's say, 130 or so students to 210 students who were living off campus. So we created a working group of students, faculty, and staff, did all kinds of focus group surveys, parent communications, all kinds of things to better understand this issue. And what we realized is that part of what was going on was we needed to make investments in upper-class housing on campus. And so not the first-year bricks, which we renovated back in 2008, and they're quite beautiful spaces, but with upper-class housing. And what students were moving to, actually, in walking distance of campus, was spaces where they could have a communal living experience in a house. They could have a private bedroom in the house. They could have a common gathering area in the house, and they could have maybe even a backyard and a kitchen. And we said, we don't have that kind of housing on campus. Not exactly that kind of housing. We have all kinds of housing, but not the kind of housing that gives you a chance to live with friends, but also have a private bedroom space. So what we've done, and you can see coming out, and you'll all be the primary beneficiaries of this work, but we will, in the fall, open up a new 4 new residential houses out on Main Street on Park Row, where we'll have 88 seniors living. And then a year from now, so in the fall of 2020, we'll be taking the Harpswell Apartments this summer down to the ground and building 132 new beds out at Harpswell Apartments in a new residential area, all taking the feedback that we heard loud and clear from students, which these spaces will allow groups of 4, 6, and 8 students to live together with a shared kitchen space within that space, also having private bedrooms within that space. And so the idea being constantly thinking about how we can make this place an even better one. But there's so many good examples of those, opportunities for us. Yeah. So I guess that needed to be our last. So thank you all. Enjoy your visit.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for spending an hour with our deans. If you're looking for your next event, we have an academic fair available for you to meet with faculty from all the different departments, which is in Morrill Gym. And we have folks available to help you with directions to get over there. Thank you.